Imagine a war so short that many people didn't even realize it had started before it was already over. A war fought between an empire and a small island kingdom. Cannons fired, buildings collapsed, soldiers fled, and before an hour had passed, the war was finished. In fact, it lasted just 38 minutes. This was the Anglo-Zanzibar War, the shortest war in recorded history. But how could an entire war begin and end in less than an hour? To understand that, we have to travel back to the late 1800s, during the height of the British Empire. Off the coast of East Africa lies the island of Zanzibar. Today, it is part of Tanzania, but in the 19th century, it was an important trading center. Ships from across the world arrived there carrying spices, ivory, and other valuable goods. Because of its location and wealth, Zanzibar became extremely important to European powers that were expanding their influence across Africa. Among those powers was Britain. By the late 1800s, the island was heavily influenced by the British government. Although Zanzibar had its own ruler, known as the Sultan, British officials held enormous political power behind the scenes. The British Empire wanted stability on the island, and most importantly, they wanted a ruler who would cooperate with them. For years, this arrangement worked, but everything changed in August of 1896. On August 25, 1896, the ruler of Zanzibar, Sultan Hamad bin Thuwaini, suddenly died. His death created a political crisis almost immediately. According to agreements with Britain, the next sultan needed British approval before taking power. But one ambitious prince refused to wait. His name was Khalid bin Bargash. Within hours of the sultan's death, Khalid seized control of the royal palace and declared himself the new ruler of Zanzibar. British officials were furious. They had a different candidate in mind, someone they believed would cooperate with British interests. Khalid had taken power without permission, and the British Empire demanded that he step down immediately. The British consul in Zanzibar delivered a direct message to Khalid. He had until the morning of August 27th to leave the palace and surrender his claim to the throne. If he refused, there would be consequences. But Khalid was determined to hold on to power. He gathered around 2,800 supporters, including palace guards and soldiers. They positioned cannons and machine guns around the palace. Barricades were built. Khalid believed the British would not actually attack. After all, this was a small island kingdom. Surely negotiations would come first. But the British Empire had no intention of negotiating. In the harbor near the palace, British warships were already waiting. 5 powerful ships armed with heavy cannons, and their commanders had been given clear orders. If Khalid did not surrender by the deadline, they would open fire. Morning arrived on August 27, 1896. British officials sent one final message to the palace. Khalid was ordered to surrender by 9 a.m. Inside the palace, tension filled the air. Khalid and his supporters prepared for battle. Outside, British warships slowly moved into position in the harbor. Their cannons were aimed directly at the palace. British soldiers and Marines prepared for combat. At exactly 9 a.m., the deadline expired. Khalid had refused to surrender. The order was given. At 9:02 a.m., British warships opened fire. Heavy naval guns thundered across the harbor. Shells slammed into the palace, tearing through its wooden structure. Within minutes, the palace began to burn. Zanzibar's defending forces attempted to fight back. They fired rifles and a few artillery pieces toward the British ships, but their weapons were no match for modern naval cannons. One of Zanzibar's ships in the harbor attempted to join the fight. It was quickly destroyed by British gunfire and sank. Meanwhile, the palace continued to take direct hits. Walls collapsed. Smoke filled the air. The defenders realized they were facing overwhelming firepower. Some began to flee. Others dropped their weapons and ran. The battle was quickly turning into a disaster. At 9:40 a.m., just 38 minutes after the first shots were fired, the fighting stopped. The palace had been heavily damaged and partially destroyed. Zanzibar's flag was lowered. Khalid himself had already fled the palace and escaped to the nearby German consulate. Without their leader and facing overwhelming British power, the defenders surrendered. The war was over. Just like that. 38 minutes. Although the war was incredibly short, it still caused serious damage. Around 500 people on the Zanzibar side were killed or wounded during the bombardment. The British suffered only a single injured sailor. Soon after the battle ended, Britain installed a new ruler, Sultan Hamad bin Thuwaini. Unlike Khalid, the new sultan cooperated fully with British authorities. Zanzibar effectively became a British protectorate. The British Empire had achieved exactly what it wanted: control of the island with almost no resistance. Wars are often remembered for lasting years. Some drag on for decades. But the Anglo-Zanzibar War is remembered for the opposite reason. It was over almost as soon as it began. In just 38 minutes, a ruler lost his throne, a palace was destroyed, and a nation's future was decided. History has seen countless wars, but none quite as short as this one.
Like and subscribe now to Anything History if you enjoy clear and engaging history, because history isn't just about the past, it's about understanding how we got here.